What is up, YouTube? This is Rob from RP Model Railroads, and may I present to you the Ephrata Valley Railroad 4x8 layout. Well, I hope you enjoyed that train action montage. Now let's get into the update aspect of the video. So what I worked on today, actually, I was able to get it done within a few hours, which was surprising, was the wiring and the nailing down of all the track on the layout. Like I mentioned before, I actually wanted to make sure that the engine yard was fully functional using DC power, meaning that I'd be able to store 7 locomotives or more on the 7 siding tracks in the locomotive yard, and be able to move them around independently if needed, and then also have this loop connected to the inner line be blocked off from the inner line on a separate circuit, so to speak, so that I'd be able to store a train there and then work on powering the locomotives inside the yard to be able to move them around independently. Well, I was able to do just that through the use of a block system using Atlas selectors. So here is the control panel area of the layout. As you can see, I actually have my MRC power pack here, dual power pack, that I stole off my Ephrata Valley Railroad 4x4 layout. I put regular power packs in its place for right now, but it actually works out perfectly for the space and the necessity for having dual power pack on this layout anyway. So I decided to just move it from the old layout to the 4x8. Then here are the Atlas selectors. So basically what I did is I wired up a wire from the back of the power pack here. You can see the blue wire is coming off the left side of the 2 power lines that are running to the inner line. So I ran a wire off the left side of the power pack on that side to the top part, or the A portion, of these 2 Atlas selector blocks. So basically the way that these blocks work, of course there's tons of videos out there about them, so I'm not creating a tutorial, but the way I was able to wire these up is that if you switch this individual switches up to block mode A, then that turns power onto one of the sidings or the loop track down below. Or if you just leave the switches in the center position, that's the off position, therefore no power will go to any of the sidings and they'll be blocked off. And this actually worked successfully after I soldered wires to 8 different track connectors and then hooked those up to the left rail on all of the sidings. So let me get closer here so you can see what I'm talking about. So there you can see the wires coming up through the layout, and actually what I did after the fact was drill a hole around the nearest track connector to the end of the particular siding I was working with, and then of course fish the wire down through underneath the layout and over to the Atlas selectors where they were wired up. So you can see the wires there going to each of the sidings. And then over here as well, let me move this FT forward manually there. You'll see the 2 wires, and then also I've done the same thing inside the engine shed. It's actually kind of a good thing because they are concealed inside the engine shed. And of course, once I lay down ballast stone or black sand, most of these wires, they won't really be that much of a nuisance. So anyway, the engine yard is fully functional, as well as the loop connected to the inner line. So let me show you how it works. So the first thing I'm going to do is switch this track here so that I can send Ephrata Valley Railroad 462 Pacific number 55 down into the loop. And also what I'm going to do is go over here to my selectors, select the last block that I've designated for that loop, push it into the A position, then turn the power on, and send number 55 down to the loop. There we go. Okay, now I'm going to switch this last switch here controlling the block on that loop off. I could also switch the switch track back to the straight position to hypothetically allow a locomotive to come out of the engine yard and run around the layout, which is exactly why I wired up the layout the way that I did. But for the purposes of this video, I just want to illustrate how the engine yard works through my block system that I was able to wire up. Now, the rest of these switches on the Atlas selectors basically represent each of the 7 tracks in the engine yard from left to right. Although it's kind of backwards with the way that I did it, but for my brain it works. So for example, the first switch here represents the far right track, and then the second switch goes to the next track, third switch goes to the next track, fourth, fifth, sixth, and seventh, and so on. Which is the way that I look at it, especially, you know, if I'm operating the layout from this particular perspective. For me, that's what works. So what I'm going to do is switch the first track into the A position, or on position, and the Ephrata Valley Railroad FTA unit should move. I have it set to forward, and there it goes. Once onto the main siding, the locomotive can then be taken out onto the rest of the inner line, or it can be backed up into another siding in the engine yard. This forward, switch this switch track, that's going straight. Still need to work on the doors of the engine shed a little bit, but there we go. Siding number 6. There we go. And last but not least, switch the block for number 7. Switch the track manually and reverse. There we go. Still have a little bit of track cleaning to do in the engine yard, which I'll get to. And there goes the engine straight out of the engine yard. So I think that the system with the Atlas selector, wiring up all 7 of the siding tracks in the engine yard, and then also blocking off the loop connected to the inner line, worked successfully. I also nailed down all the train track before recording this video, so it's nice and sturdy, not going to go anywhere, because I'm pretty satisfied with how the wiring turned out and how the layout is fully functional. So, of course, I still need to clean the track a little bit better. I did go over it with an eraser, but I will be giving it a pretty good cleaning, especially in the engine yard area. And then, of course, there's a lot more scenery details to come, like ballasting with dollar store black sand, and also adding the diesel maintenance facilities that I have planned to these two tracks here in the front of the engine yard. Of course, tons of scenery, etc. But the major aspect of the layout, wiring and laying down and nailing all the track is complete, and I am very pleased with how it turned out. So, thanks again for watching, everyone. Be sure to stay tuned for another Ephrata Valley Railroad 4x8 layout update video coming soon. And of course, I do post edited photos of my Ephrata Valley Railroad trains and other old model trains on my Instagram, as well as updates. So be sure to follow me there if you haven't already done so. Thanks again.